1956. Junior Johnson's moonshine bust. In 1956, future NASCAR legend Junior Johnson was caught at his father's illegal moonshine still in Wilkes County, North Carolina. As federal agents raided the still, Johnson tried to flee but became tangled in a barbed wire fence and was arrested. This backroads drama was fitting for Johnson. Like many early NASCAR drivers, he honed his driving skills running bootleg whiskey. Johnson was convicted in federal court for illegally distilling liquor and served about 11 months and 3 days at the federal penitentiary in Chillicothe, Ohio. The sentence interrupted his rising NASCAR career, but hardly stopped it. After prison, Johnson returned to racing and achieved great success, eventually retiring with 50 NASCAR wins. President Ronald Reagan granted Junior Johnson a full and unconditional pardon on December 26, 1985 for his 1956 moonshining conviction. Far from derailing his life, the moonshine arrest became part of Johnson's legend. He embraced his image as the last American hero, a rural folk hero who outran the law on country roads and then dominated on the track. The story of Johnson's arrest and later pardon is often cited as quintessential NASCAR lore, a reminder of the sport's roots in bootlegging and how Johnson turned a run-in with the law into fuel for his fame. His Hall of Fame career and Reagan's pardon underscore how fully he rehabilitated his image, transforming an arrest into a celebrated part of NASCAR history. 1980s. Gary Balough's drug smuggling scandal. By the early 1980s, stock car driver Gary Balough had tasted racing glory, but he also became entangled in a massive drug smuggling ring. In early 1983, Balough was indicted on drug trafficking charges as part of a federal investigation that ensnared 70 people, including several racers. Prosecutors allege Balough helped smuggle large quantities of marijuana into the US as part of a $300 million operation. The bust stunned the racing community. Balough had just secured a NASCAR Cup ride for 1983 with a top team, only to be arrested in a criminal conspiracy straight out of Miami Vice. Balough was convicted of conspiracy to smuggle and distribute marijuana. He received a hefty sentence, 45.5 months in federal prison, nearly 4 years. This prison term effectively derailed his NASCAR career. At the time of his February 1983 arrest, Balough had to abandon planned NASCAR events. Ultimately, he served prison time. The sentence not only cost Balough his freedom, but also torpedoed a lucrative sponsorship deal and a promising ride he had lined up. Balough's downfall became one of NASCAR's cautionary tales. A short-track superstar who could have gone all the way, Balough instead spent the mid-80s behind bars. After release, he did return to racing in lower divisions and even won short-track events, but the mainstream opportunity was gone. Culturally, his story fed into the lore of racers with checkered pasts. Fans and media recalled how President Reagan had just gotten his war on drugs underway as Balough was convicted, a stark contrast to Junior Johnson's moonshine pardon granted in 1985. Balough eventually wrote an autobiography and spoke openly about his mistakes. His case remains a significant example of a NASCAR driver serving prison time, a dramatic intersection of racing ambition and illegal temptation. 2001. Jimmy Spencer's assault complaint. In the early 2000s, Jimmy Spencer, aptly nicknamed Mr. Excitement, lived up to his reputation in an ugly post-race confrontation. In August 2003, after a Cup Series race at Michigan, Spencer had a run-in with rival Kurt Busch. Busch had provoked Spencer on track, and after the race, an infuriated Spencer approached Busch's car on pit road and punched Busch in the face through the window. Busch was wearing his helmet but suffered a bloodied nose. Reports vary on whether the injury came directly from the punch or from contact with the helmet interior. Busch filed an assault complaint with authorities, alleging Spencer's punch constituted battery. The incident made headlines as NASCAR's latest feud turned physical. Local police took Busch's complaint and investigated. Spencer was arrested at the track, taken to the county jail, and released on bond that evening pending a misdemeanor assault charge. The case proceeded briefly, but prosecutors later declined to pursue it. Records show it was dismissed rather than Busch personally dropping it. With the charges withdrawn, Spencer faced no criminal penalties. However, NASCAR itself did punish him. Spencer was fined $25,000 and suspended for one race by NASCAR for the assault. He missed the next Cup event, marking a significant league-imposed penalty even though law enforcement stepped back. Spencer later made public comments acknowledging the incident and also reportedly apologized, albeit somewhat begrudgingly. The Spencer-Busch punch was widely covered in sports media, emblematic of NASCAR's rough-and-tumble image at the time. Fans were divided. Some cheered Spencer's old-school take-no-guff style, while others condemned this violence. Spencer's 2003 Cup ride with Morgan McClure ended after the season for performance and sponsorship reasons, with this incident cited as a last straw for some sponsors. Nonetheless, Spencer's persona as a blunt, aggressive racer only grew. He later joked about the punch on TV as a commentator. Busch, meanwhile, carried the incident as a chip on his shoulder in subsequent rivalries. In the end, a potential criminal assault case turned into a NASCAR folklore moment, one that highlighted how the sport polices itself when passions overflow. 2002, Tony Stewart's photographer altercation. Reigning NASCAR champion Tony Stewart had a notorious boiling point, and it overflowed at the 2002 Brickyard 400 in Indianapolis. After a frustrating race, Stewart stormed off pit road. A freelance photographer, Gary Mook of the Indianapolis Star, approached to snap a photo of the angry driver. Stewart, enraged at the intrusion, shoved or struck the photographer's camera and chest area. Accounts conflict on whether it was an open hand push or a punch. The confrontation happened in full view of other media. Mook later recounted that Stewart struck him while he was just doing his job, and that he was shocked by the sudden attack. The incident painted a volatile picture, the superstar driver physically lashing out at a member of the press. In the immediate aftermath, no criminal charges were filed. Stewart apologized directly to Mook, and the matter was resolved privately without formal settlement or Joe Gibbs acting as a party to any settlement. Stewart personally apologized to Mook, and reportedly dealt with it man-to-man, which led the photographer to forego pressing assault charges. NASCAR, however, took action. Stewart was fined $10,000 and placed on probation by NASCAR for the rest of the season, and was required to undergo anger management evaluation. He was also placed on probation by NASCAR for the remainder of the 2002 season. The penalties were meant to send a message that such behavior was unacceptable. Stewart publicly apologized soon after, acknowledging he was way out of line. The media seized on this altercation as proof of Stewart's temper issues. It was front-page sports news, feeding a narrative that Stewart was NASCAR's bad boy champion. Home Depot publicly supported NASCAR's disciplinary action, and Joe Gibbs Racing reportedly levied its own internal fine on Stewart. Culturally, the incident raised questions about driver decorum and media access. Photographers have a job to do, but Stewart felt hounded in a vulnerable moment. Ultimately, Stewart complied with counseling and managed to rehabilitate his public image over time, winning fans back with humor and charity work. But for years, anytime Stewart bristled at a camera, people recalled Indy 2002. The punching a photographer episode became part of Tony Stewart's lore, a reminder of the fiery competitiveness that fueled his success and occasionally singed those around him. 2005, Kurt Busch's reckless driving detainment. In November 2005, just after qualifying at Phoenix, Kurt Busch, the 2004 NASCAR Cup champion, had a run-in with law enforcement that made as many headlines as any race. Busch was driving near Phoenix International Raceway when he ran a stop sign and nearly hit another car, catching a sheriff deputy's attention. When pulled over, Busch was argumentative and uncooperative, even allegedly asking the famous line, "Do you know who I am?" to the officer. The deputy smelled alcohol on Busch's breath and suspected DUI. Busch refused field sobriety tests at the scene. Deputies alleged the odor of alcohol, but no verified on-scene breath test result showing alcohol was ever released publicly. The situation escalated. Busch was detained and taken to a mobile command post at the track for another breathalyzer. Ironically, that machine malfunctioned, so a precise blood alcohol level couldn't be obtained. Ultimately, Busch was cited for reckless driving and released. He was not charged with DUI because no admissible blood alcohol evidence was obtained. Busch was formally cited for reckless driving, a misdemeanor traffic offense, and the sheriff's department noted his belligerent behavior in their report. With no solid BAC evidence, DUI charges were dropped. Busch later agreed to a plea arrangement on the reckless driving charge, reportedly receiving probation and a fine. Importantly, the incident had immediate professional consequences. Roush Racing suspended Busch for the final 2 races of the 2005 season, despite him being the reigning 2004 Cup Series champion, and released him early from his contract with the team. Roush then parted ways with Busch, ending his tenure a bit early. Legally, after fulfilling community service and likely paying fines, Busch faced no further punishment. The timing and nature of this arrest sent shockwaves. Media outlets splashed headlines about the reigning NASCAR champ being detained, and the arrest was handled by Maricopa County Sheriff's deputies under Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who publicly quipped that Busch should confine his speeding to the racetrack. fans were divided. Some saw it as Busch's arrogance getting a comeuppance. Others felt he was treated harshly. NASCAR itself took no additional action since Busch was already benched by his team. Busch issued a public apology. "I regret the incident, I apologize to the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department," and entered a quieter phase to repair his image. Over the next few years, Busch undertook public apologies and later anger management counseling following separate incidents, not specifically court-mandated from the 2005 case, as he rebuilt his reputation with new teams. Still, the 2005 Phoenix episode lingered as part of his legacy, a cautionary tale of temper and alcohol nearly ruining a career. It highlighted that even champions aren't above the law, and it arguably humbled Kurt Busch into a later career elder statesman who often references having learned from his past mistakes. 2007. Aaron Fike's heroin arrest. In July 2007, NASCAR Truck Series driver Aaron Fike was arrested in a scenario more shocking than any on-track crash. Fike and his fiancée were found in an SUV in the parking lot of Kings Island Amusement Park, near Cincinnati, with drug paraphernalia scattered about. Security had noticed suspicious activity in the vehicle. Police arrived and discovered syringes and a spoon with residue inside Fike's SUV. According to police reports, Fike admitted using heroin that day. The then 24-year-old Fike was in the midst of a solid season. He was 8th in Truck Series points at the time of his suspension, and this arrest sent immediate shockwaves through the sport. Fike was charged with felony possession of heroin and a misdemeanor count of possession of drug paraphernalia. NASCAR reacted swiftly, suspending Fike indefinitely within days of the arrest. Facing potential felony penalties, Fike took proactive steps. He entered rehab for his heroin addiction and, with the help of his attorney, proposed a deal to prosecutors. In lieu of jail, Fike would become an anti-drug advocate. Impressed by his rehabilitation, the court agreed to reduce the felony to a misdemeanor. In late 2007, Fike pled guilty to a reduced charge and received probation, 2 years according to local reports, rather than prison time. The judge accepted Fike's plan for community outreach, speaking at schools and tracks about the dangers of drugs. Fike's fiancée, Cassandra Davidson, was also arrested. Charges were later dropped after she entered treatment. Fike's heroin bust was a watershed moment for NASCAR's drug policy. It was almost unthinkable that a driver could be using heroin, even on race days. Fike later admitted that he sometimes did. The media covered Fike's candid confessions in awe. This was a young talent derailed by an opioid addiction at the height of America's opioid crisis. NASCAR tightened its drug testing in response. Culturally, Fike's willingness to speak about his addiction garnered some sympathy. His quote, "If not for my arrest, I would be dead." This underscored the arrest as a twisted blessing that forced him into sobriety. While Fike never returned to NASCAR, his suspension was never formally lifted, he spoke publicly about addiction at various venues. Racing against drugs was a general education effort he supported. The sport, embarrassed but enlightened, used his case to reinforce its zero-tolerance stance. Aaron Fike's story remains one of the most dramatic falls from grace in NASCAR, but also a tale of personal recovery sparked by a dark moment. 2011. Jeremy Mayfield's meth and theft case. Former NASCAR Cup driver Jeremy Mayfield, who had already been indefinitely suspended by NASCAR in 2009 after testing positive for methamphetamine, fell further from grace with a dramatic arrest on November 1, 2011. Acting on a tip, sheriff's deputies raided Mayfield's rural North Carolina home and uncovered a trove of stolen goods and drugs. Authorities found items like heavy equipment, power tools, and scrap metal that were reportedly stolen from local businesses, as well as a small quantity of methamphetamine, approximately 1.5 grams. Mayfield was arrested that evening and charged with possession of methamphetamine and 18 felony counts of possession of stolen property. The arrest painted a picture of Mayfield not just as an alleged drug user, but as allegedly tied up in regional theft rings, a stunning turn for a driver who had won NASCAR races and contended for championships in the early 2000s. The legal process was long and winding. Mayfield staunchly proclaimed his innocence on the thefts and argued the meth was planted or related to his prior dispute with NASCAR. Nonetheless, by 2014, he struck a deal to resolve the charges. Mayfield pleaded guilty to reduced misdemeanor charges, specifically 2 counts of possessing stolen goods and 1 count of possession of drug paraphernalia. In January 2014, a judge sentenced him to a 45-day suspended jail term and 18 months of unsupervised probation. He also had to pay $88,000 in restitution to theft victims, much of which he paid immediately. This plea meant Mayfield avoided actual prison time as long as he stayed out of trouble. The felony methamphetamine charge was essentially dropped as part of the plea agreement. Mayfield did not admit to being a meth user in open court, only to possessing items that weren't his. Mayfield's downfall was highly public. Media outlets ran with the narrative of a NASCAR star turned cautionary tale, from winning the 2000 Brickyard 400 to mugshots and meth accusations. Fans who once cheered him were bewildered. Mayfield himself continued to protest his innocence in interviews, fueling debate and conspiracy theories in the NASCAR community. NASCAR made clear Mayfield's indefinite suspension would remain unless he completed its Road to Recovery rehabilitation program, which he declined. The sympathy many had for Mayfield in 2009 eroded after the 2011 raid. The stash of stolen goods, reportedly including even some race car parts from fellow teams, portrayed him in a damning light. By the time of his plea deal, Mayfield was financially ruined and socially ostracized from the sport. Culturally, his case underscored the severity of NASCAR's drug policy stance and served as a sobering example of how addiction and criminal associations can destroy a career. Today, Jeremy Mayfield is often referenced alongside the likes of Tim Richmond or Shane Mile as one of NASCAR's most lamentable what-if stories, his 2011 arrest being the point of no return. 2013. Tyler Walker's 150-mile-per-hour police chase. Former NASCAR driver Tyler Walker led police in a Hollywood-style tri-state car chase in January 2013 that left jaws dropping. The saga began in Nevada when troopers tried to pull over Walker's black BMW for speeding. Walker, then 33, refused to stop and fled at speeds up to 150 miles per hour, passing through the Arizona state line and continuing into Utah. Law enforcement agencies from Nevada, Arizona, and Utah joined in the pursuit. It finally ended after officers deployed stop sticks, or spike strips, in Utah to disable Walker's car. When arrested, Walker was found to be under the influence and in possession of drugs. When arrested, officers reported finding methamphetamine, marijuana, drug paraphernalia, and an open container of alcohol in his vehicle. He was also charged with driving under the influence as part of the case. The arrest video, with Walker stepping out after the long pursuit, became a notorious clip illustrating a NASCAR driver in serious trouble. Walker faced several charges in Utah related to the chase, including felony counts and misdemeanors. He was ultimately prosecuted in Utah for the most serious offenses. In December 2014, Walker pled guilty to 5 charges, including felony evading, failure to stop at an officer's command, felony drug possession, DUI, misdemeanor, and other drug and alcohol misdemeanors. The judge sentenced him to up to 5 years in Utah State Prison for the felony counts, along with 180-day and 90-day misdemeanor terms, most of which were suspended. However, Walker served 90 days in prison while the remainder was suspended. He was fined over $6,000, mostly suspended except for about $1,665 to pay. Upon release, he began 36 months of supervised probation, with requirements for regular drug testing and treatment. Essentially, if Walker stayed clean and out of trouble for 3 years, he'd avoid further incarceration. Notably, Walker had initially missed a sentencing date, arriving 45 minutes late, which got him jailed for 2 weeks in March 2015 out of the judge's displeasure. Walker's transgression was major news, especially in the motorsports press. A former NASCAR truck and Nationwide Series driver found himself the subject of dramatic crime reports. The phrase 150-mile-per-hour chase made headlines across Europe, often with a tinge of dark irony about a NASCAR driver treating the open road like a racetrack. Fans and former colleagues were stunned. Walker had struggled with substance abuse before, but this was off the charts. NASCAR had already suspended him in 2007 for a failed drug test, so he hadn't been racing in the series at the time of the chase. Afterward, any slim hopes of a comeback were dashed entirely. Walker expressed regret in court, saying he was working to get his life together and even working a regular job. The judge's scolding, highlighting how Walker endangered countless lives, was a stark reminder of the severity of his actions. In racing circles, Walker's story became an almost mythic cautionary tale, echoing through discussions about drugs and mental health. Ultimately, the 2013 chase and its legal aftermath closed the chapter on Tyler Walker's racing career, but perhaps opened a new one of personal rehabilitation under the close watch of the law. 2013. Travis Kvapil's domestic violence case. On October 2013, NASCAR driver Travis Kvapil was arrested at his Mooresville, North Carolina home after a frightening domestic dispute. According to police reports, Kvapil got into an argument with his wife Jennifer that turned physical. He allegedly pulled his wife by her hair into a bedroom and blocked the door, refusing to let her leave. When she tried to escape, Kvapil was accused of striking her on the head. The incident allegedly left Jennifer with minor injuries and was understandably shaken. Kvapil was taken into custody and charged with misdemeanor misdemeanor assault on a female and false imprisonment, essentially domestic violence charges given North Carolina statutes. The news of a NASCAR driver's domestic assault arrest brought unwanted attention to the sport during the 2013 Chase for the Sprint Cup. Kvapil faced 2 misdemeanor charges. In January 2014, he agreed to a deferred prosecution deal, a plea agreement, to avoid a conviction. Kvapil did not plead guilty but entered a deferred prosecution agreement under which he accepted stipulated conditions. He would serve 2 years of probation, complete 72 hours of community service, attend an anger management class, and pay $460 in court costs. Importantly, if he met all those requirements and stayed out of trouble, the case would be dismissed without a conviction on his record after the 2 years. Essentially, it was a conditional dismissal, often offered to first-time offenders in domestic cases who undergo counseling. In 2016, upon successfully finishing probation, the assault and imprisonment charges were indeed dropped by the court. Kvapil never served jail time for the incident. Kvapil's arrest came at a time when sports were under the microscope for domestic violence issues, the NFL's Ray Rice case, etc. NASCAR issued a statement expressing concern but did not suspend Kvapil, which some advocates criticized. In fact, Kvapil raced that same week in October 2013, and his team, BK Racing, kept him in the car. Media coverage was significant but relatively short-lived. The story resurfaced in early 2014 when Kvapil took the plea deal, and again in 2016 when news broke that his charges were dropped. For Kvapil, the personal and professional repercussions were notable. Sponsors were skittish, and he was not re-signed to his Cup ride after 2013. Though performance and funding were also factors, the arrest did not help his reputation. He continued in lower-tier races but largely fell off the NASCAR radar. Within the NASCAR garage, the incident was met with disappointment, but also a degree of quiet discretion. Many drivers and officials treated it as a private family matter once legal steps were taken. In the broader cultural context, Kvapil's case reinforced that NASCAR wasn't immune to the domestic violence problems facing other sports, and it prompted the league to clarify its policies on off-track driver conduct. Ultimately, Travis Kvapil's name now often appears in lists of NASCAR's legal troubles, remembered as the driver who nearly saw jail time for domestic assault, but managed to rehabilitate both legally and personally through the court's structured second chance. 2018. Rick Crawford's child solicitation conviction. One of the most disturbing cases in NASCAR history unfolded in 2018, when retired Truck Series driver Rick Crawford was arrested in an FBI sting operation. In February 2018, Crawford was ensnared by federal agents in Florida after he responded to a Craigslist ad that he believed was a father offering access to his underage daughter for over online messages and texts. Crawford arranged to pay about $75 to have with a 12-year-old girl. The father was actually an undercover agent, and when Crawford arrived at a prearranged location expecting to meet the child, he was arrested. The complaint detailed sickening specifics. At one point, Crawford texted that he would love for her to be naked and ready. The racing community was stunned and horrified by the news of a beloved veteran driver. Crawford had 5 Truck Series wins and was a series mainstay, allegedly attempting such a crime. Crawford was charged federally with attempted enticement of a minor for activity, a felony carrying a minimum 10-year sentence. In August 2018, a jury found him guilty after only a short deliberation. In November 2018, U.S. District Judge Roy Dalton Jr. sentenced Rick Crawford to 130 months in federal prison. That's 10 years and 10 months. Judge Dalton instead imposed lifetime supervised release after Crawford's prison term. News outlets initially said 10 years, but the judgment says life-term supervised release. The 130-month sentence sat close to the statutory minimum, reflecting perhaps his lack of prior criminal history. Crawford, 60 at sentencing, tearfully argued he never intended to harm a real child, claiming he thought it was an adult roleplay fantasy. The court was unmoved. Given the explicit evidence of his intent, Crawford went to federal prison immediately, as he had already been jailed since his conviction. His earliest release will be in his 70s. Media coverage was extensive and prurient. The story broke during the #MeToo era and amid heightened awareness of child predators, so it gained traction beyond sports pages. Ex-NASCAR driver busted in child sting was a headline that ran from ESPN to People magazine. NASCAR issued a statement condemning the act and confirming Crawford had been permanently banned from any NASCAR facilities. Fans and former colleagues universally expressed disgust. Many noted the tragic irony that Crawford had daughters of his own. His case became a reference point in discussions of keeping motorsports a family-friendly space. Hall of Fame driver Mark Martin said he felt sick to his stomach hearing about Crawford, culturally, this conviction tarnished a legacy. Crawford had been seen as a personable, blue-collar racer, and now his name is associated with one of the most heinous crimes. The NASCAR community largely scrubbed references to him. For instance, he's rarely mentioned in highlight reels of past truck races, despite his accomplishments. In the end, Rick Crawford's arrest and conviction served as a harsh reminder that even heroes to some can harbor horrific secrets. His 2018 imprisonment remains perhaps the darkest saga involving a NASCAR driver. 2023, Kyle Busch's Mexico firearm incident. In January 2023, two-time NASCAR Cup champion Kyle Busch found himself unexpectedly on the wrong side of international law. While traveling home from a vacation in Cancun, Mexico, Busch was detained at the airport when security x-rays discovered a .380 caliber handgun and 6 hollow point bullets in his carry-on bag. Busch, who said he holds a valid U.S. concealed carry permit, said he had forgotten the small caliber pistol was in his bag. Mexican authorities, however, enforced strict gun laws, and Busch was arrested by the National Guard on January 27, 2023 for illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition. He spent at least one night in custody as the case was processed. Busch publicly disclosed the incident after returning to the United States. A judge in Quintana Roo imposed a 3.5-year prison sentence and a monetary fine, reported at about $1,000, but the punishment was converted to a conditional or suspended sentence, meaning Busch did not serve the prison term provided he met the court's conditions. However, crucially, the judge allowed the sentence to be conditional, suspended. Upon Busch paying a bond, the amount wasn't officially disclosed, he was permitted to leave Mexico and not serve prison time as long as he met the conditions. In effect, Busch received a suspended sentence. He did not have to spend 42 months behind bars. He did pay the fine and likely forfeited the firearm. Once back home, Busch issued a contrite statement. He acknowledged making a mistake by forgetting it was in his bag, and said he fully cooperated and accepted the penalties. The Mexican authorities considered the matter resolved with a conditional punishment, and Busch incurred no further legal consequences, provided he doesn't violate any terms if he ever returns to Mexico. News of Kyle Busch's arrest in Mexico exploded on both sports media and mainstream news, albeit briefly. The image of a NASCAR star sentenced to prison overseas, even if suspended, was eye-popping. Busch's quick and transparent apology helped control the narrative. He explained the scenario on social media, and fans largely accepted it as an honest mistake from a gun owner rather than someone with any nefarious intent. NASCAR announced it would not discipline him, noting Busch had self-reported the incident and it didn't violate their conduct policy. The incident sparked broader discussion about international firearm laws and travel. Even team owner Richard Childress publicly expressed support for Busch. In the end, Busch's Mexico mishap became a cautionary tale for travelers rather than a stain on his reputation. Within weeks, Busch was back to racing, with the issue considered closed. It was a stark reminder to all gun owners to know other countries' laws, delivered by a superstar who got a very lucky break from a foreign court. Which one of these arrests surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. Check out these videos YouTube thinks you might be interested in. Subscribe for more.